Today's spoiler video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Use the link below to pre-order your cards today. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Ravnica Allegiance spoilers. And today, we got 3 cards to talk about, primarily of the Azorius variety. We finally got our Azorius mechanic. There had been some debate, would it be a returning mechanic, would it be Detain? But it is a pretty sweet one, and the mechanic is Addendum, as shown off by emergency powers and also Sphinx's insight. So Addendum shows up on instants, but if you cast an Addendum card during your main phase, you get an extra benefit out of it. So for example, emergency powers, 7 mana instant. Each player shuffles their hand and their graveyard into their library and draws 7 cards. You exile emergency powers. Addendum, if you cast this spell during your main phase, and I love how it is worded, and you can actually say Addendum there. It's so sweet. If you cast this spell during your main phase, you can put a permanent card with converted mana cost 7 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. Also, another example, our common with Addendum is Sphinx's Insight, so instant speed, 4 mana, draw 2 cards. Addendum, if you cast this spell during your main phase, you also gain 2 life. So out of these cards, emergency powers is the more exciting of the two. As far as Sphinx's Insight, I think the problem here is I believe it's just a worse version of Chemister's Insight. We have seen draw 2 for 4 mana be playable through our recent standards, Glimmer of Genius, Illumination, Chemister's Insight, but I think in our current standard format, most decks are probably going to rather have the jumpstart ability of Chemister's Insight to cast it 2 times, rather than the possibility of tapping out on your main phase to gain a couple extra life. I don't know, I guess if mono red is the dominant deck and control decks really need 2 life, maybe there's an argument for it, but I think for the most part, you're going to be casting this one in limited, and Chemister's Insight will be the constructed version of the draw 2 for 4 mana. On the other hand, Emergency Powers is pretty busted. It is essentially a Time Twister, one of the oldest Power 9 cards, in an extremely powerful effect where each player shuffles their hand and their graveyard into their library and draws 7 cards. Time Reversal is another example that fell really flat. This card was super hyped. It was the most expensive card in its set. It was like $40, and then it ended up the bulkiest of bulk rares, like literally as cheap as it gets for a bulk mythic. Emergency Powers, though, does something really important that Time Twister, Time Reversal, the other variants on this don't do, and that is you can cast it as an instant. And the problem with cards like Time Reversal that we've seen time and time again is you spend 5 mana, each player refills their hand to 7 cards, but your opponent is going to untap and be able to use those cards first, so you're often putting yourself at a disadvantage when you cast Time Reversal. So the instant speed aspect of Emergency Powers makes it a little bit more similar to Time Spiral than anything else. Time Spiral is another example of this type of effect that solves the your opponent gets to go first problem. Time Spiral does this by untapping 7 lands, and in defense of Time Spiral, and to not be too hyped about Emergency Powers, it's very true that you can't combo off with Emergency Powers in the same way that you can use Time Spiral. Time Spiral often used in like Storm combo decks, High Tide combo decks, where you're untapping those lands for value and going this big combo turn. Emergency Powers doesn't let you do that, but the fact that you can wait until your opponent's end step, cast this, and you get to be the first person to untap with 7 cards is a really huge upside compared to past versions of this, and it works really well with a lot of cards we have in Standard, and in some ways, I think the best argument here is it's like Nexus of Fate, and Nexus of Fate is a card that when you read the effect, you're like, okay, extra turn spells cost 5 mana, maybe 6 mana these days. 7 mana is a lot for an extra turn effect, but the fact that Nexus of Fate is an instant makes it significantly more powerful, and I think we're going to see the same thing with Emergency Powers. Emergency Powers, yes, 7 mana is more than you would think, with like Time Reversal being 5 mana, but the flexibility of being able to cast this as an instant more than makes up for the fact that it costs a little bit extra mana, and we saw Nexus of Fate be pretty underrated, and then be pretty busted shortly thereafter because of the instant speed aspect of it. The other aspect of emergency powers is even if you do cast it main phase, you kind of get to use your mana first to some extent. You spend 7 mana to cast it, but assuming you draw into a big permanent, you can use the Addendum mechanic to just slam it into play. And this means you draw 7 cards and then immediately get 7 mana worth of Pelakka Wurm or Chromium or 6 mana of Thousand Year Storm. So if you're putting something massive into play, it kind of minimizes the downside of you're probably being tapped out or mostly tapped out and your opponent having 7 cards in hand, because you're going to have this huge threat to be able to maintain the battlefield and not just die on the backswing with your opponent having 7 cards. And you can also just play Planeswalkers. Those are permanents as well, Teferis, Veraskas. So I think that emergency powers, I'm excited to see what happens with this card. It seems like it can be pretty scary in a way that Nexus of Fate is scary. The instant speed just making it very exciting. I'm hoping we can do some crazy combo stuff with emergency powers. I don't know if it'll show up in fair decks, but the instant speed aspect of it makes it really interesting. Our final card today snuck out late. We have a lowly uncommon split card, Incubation Incongruity, and this one is pretty much 2 things put together. Side 1 is Commune with Nature, except you can cast it in blue or green, which is probably the biggest upside. You dig 5 deep for a creature, put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library, and the reason this is especially exciting is because you can cast it in a deck that does not have green mana. Commune with Nature, not that exciting. A blue Commune with Nature, though, in a world where people are trying to dig for, let's say, Crackling Drakes, Arclight Phoenixes, things like that, is actually a pretty big deal. You get all your spells, matters, triggers. It's only 1 mana, and you dig to find one of your handful of threats. So I think the blue aspect of Incubation makes this card potentially playable all the way back to Modern. It's a really unique effect because of the color breaking aspect of it. As far as Incongruity, I mean, it's fine. It's a 3 mana instant speed removal spell, basically an expensive version of Pongify or Rapid Hybridization that also exiles a creature. It's a nice upside. I think most decks, though, are going to be playing it for the incubation half of the card, and then just having the flexibility of maybe being a removal spell once in a while is a nice benefit as well. So I will be excited to see what happens with Incubation. The fact that it can be cast in mono blue or like a Izzet deck is really, really unique, really, really scary, and kind of a pretty big color pie break, I think. So we'll have to see what happens. Usually when things get massively shifted in the color pie, some crazy stuff can happen, and I think that might be the power of Incubation. So anyway, those have been our daily Ravnica Allegiance spoilers for today. So let me know what you think about these cards. What do you think about emergency powers, Addendum, or Sphinx's Insight, Addendum? How about the new split card, Incubation Incongruity? Can we combo off with emergency powers? Is there any argument for playing Sphinx's Insight in Constructed over something like Chemister's Insight? Let me know what you think. And now that we've gotten all the mechanics from Ravnica Allegiance, give me your rankings. Which mechanics do you like best? Which do you like least? Which are you most excited for? What are you hoping to see be done with these mechanics as we get the rest of the set over the upcoming couple, 2-3 weeks? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.